Today we're going to chat about purpose. What is the author's purpose? When an author writes, he or she writes the paragraph, passage, article, book, or whatever for a very specific reason known as a purpose. This purpose is closely tied to the main idea as it guides and informs the formation of that particular main idea. How do you detect purpose? Using your experience as both a reader and writer, you must infer why the author wrote this piece, because it will not be stated explicitly. The author's not going to say, I'm writing this to inform you or persuade you. You must make an educated guess about the purpose by examining the word choice, the sentence structure, and the effect the passage has upon you. Now, there are several major purposes for writing, and we are just going to include 5 here for academic reasons. To inform, to persuade, to narrate, to describe, and to entertain. One of the most common purposes is to inform. An informative passage presents evidence, facts, reasons, and results. It explains how or why something exists or happens. Words used for this purpose will be factual and straightforward, like those used in scientific findings, textbooks, and medical diagnoses. Here's an example. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918. He died December 5, 2013. He was a famous South African politician, philanthropist, and anti-apartheid activist. Mandela was an African nationalist and served as the president of the African National Congress from 1991 to 1997. Now, in this example, the author informs the reader about Nelson Mandela in a very objective or factual manner. There's no subjective or emotional language in here. Now, another very important purpose is to persuade. While a persuasive piece may use facts, it will also contain opinions, personal preferences, biases, and emotional language that will be used to change your mind, take a different position, or help you make a judgment. Persuasive writing is found in editorials, film reviews, certain blogs, and letters to the editor. Now, when looking at persuasive writing, you may find words like should, must, ought. There will be value words and superlative words like good, better, best, bad, worse, worst, things like this. So be on the lookout for emotional or subjective language like that. Let's take a look at an example. Everyone must perform his or her basic civic duty and vote in the upcoming election. This bozo has been in office far too long, and he's had a terrible influence on our state. From ruining our educational system to turning down federal funding that would have helped us, he's done nothing but make wrong moves and deliver empty promises to all of us. It's time to make a change for the better. No one could be worse than this poor excuse for a governor. Aha. Well, obviously, we can tell that this person doesn't really like the governor and is telling us to go out and perform our basic civic duty and vote in the upcoming election to change this person, get somebody else. Look at some of the very subjective language that's being used in here. This bozo. Far too long. How do you measure far too long? Terrible influence. Ruining. Look at all this very subjective language. Done nothing. Wrong moves. Deliver empty promises. It's time to make a change. That person is definitely trying to persuade us. No one could be worse than this poor excuse. So there you have it. So you already probably know that a lot of persuasive writing is found in the world of politics. Let's look at another key point and look at another purpose for writing. A third purpose for writing is to narrate. What is narrating? Well, generally, a narration will tell a story or describe a sequence of events, and while objective language can be found in such a passage, there may be some emotionally charged words or personal biases used, depending upon whether or not the author is personally involved in the story being told. Let us take a look at our example. Since Norman Marshall was born out of wedlock in 1899, his birth certificate was stamped bastard, as was the custom of Victorian England. His distant aristocratic father, an officer in the British Army, never acknowledged him. Norman entered the Army in 1914 and became a foot soldier. Private Marshall lied about his age, and at 15 he was sent to the trenches in France as cannon fodder, those less trained infantrymen who would fight against hopeless odds for some strategic goal. During the Battle of Loos in 1915, the British attacked the Germans. Norman was shot in the leg, was left under a pile of dead men in a trench for 3 days. Gangrene set in. The medics performed a surgical amputation without anesthetic, and he survived. Norman received 3 medals and a pension for serving his country. He eventually married, and by 1920 he had a daughter. Norman had learned to walk on an artificial leg and was always active, whether painting his house or tending to his beautiful garden. In 1946, he moved to Canada to be close to his daughter, and by the 1950s, he was playing with his 2 young granddaughters. I always knew my grandfather as a soft-spoken, handsome, blue-eyed man who loved his family and was very active in his day-to-day living. He never complained about what had happened to him, and he always worked as hard as any able-bodied person because he didn't see himself as disabled. It wasn't until much later in my life that I realized what a hero he was. The song that says that you don't know what you've got till it's gone really describes my relationship with him. I still miss him to this day. Now, obviously, the author is narrating a story about her grandfather's experience with war and life from 1899 through the present time, so it describes a series of events. This is a true narrative. Now let's go take a look at some of the very emotionally charged words that are used in this narrative passage. And first of all, I believe there's a correction to be made. Born out of wedlock. So there is a mistake in our passage, so I'm just trying to get rid of that so no one will be confused and think that we're deliberately trying to make errors in here. Now, let us take a look at some of our very emotionally charged words. Well, first of all, it was the custom in Victorian England to put bastard on your birth certificate if you were born out of wedlock. Here's another emotional word: distant, aristocratic. Cannon fodder is a very emotional word because it's talking about those men who were sent in to fight against hopeless odds, and they, as often as they were killed by the cannons, a whole bunch more of them would just spring right up and keep on fighting. What else in here is emotional? Let's look for some more emotional words. Beautiful. This beautiful garden. Soft-spoken, handsome, loved, and hero. You see all of these words that connect the author very emotionally in this narrative. And that's how you have to pick out purpose, by going in and actually looking at the actual words that the author is using. Let's just move on here. The fourth purpose for writing is to describe. A description appeals to the senses to create an impression or picture of something or someone by using words that appeal to all of our physical senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, or smell. Description involves the physical characteristics of a person, place, or thing. Generally, objective language would be used for this purpose, but depending upon the subject being described, it's possible, again, that the author might use subjective language if they're describing a person, or if they feel emotional about the object being described. Let's take a look at our example. There she lay, wriggling on a pink blanket on the warming table, cooing for all the nurses in the delivery room. With masses of long black curls and huge brown eyes, Avalon had finally made her grand entrance into the world, all 10.5 pounds of her, with chubby cheeks and skin as pink and smooth as a rose petal. She was the epitome of adorable until we could all smell a very pungent odor emanating from her diaper. Okay, now obviously the writer is using words to appeal to all of our senses. We can hear her cooing, we can see what she looks like, talks about how soft her skin is, like a rose petal, and then we can also smell her. So definitely the author has gone ahead and touched all of our senses to create this very strong and emotional picture of this little baby. So let's take a look at some of the words that might be considered emotional. Adorable. And maybe you could find a few more. But obviously, this person is very happy that this little person is here. Could be a grandmother that's written this. We never know. And of course, the last sentence, we've thrown in a little bit of humor. But overall, the author is trying to describe something. So let's move along to our next grouping. The last purpose is to entertain. Now, whenever an author wants to divert a reader's attention from reality or to amuse someone, he or she will write to entertain, to make the reader laugh, to forget about what's going on in his or her life. Humor may be used in conjunction with other purposes, but it can also be used as a primary purpose. Language can be objective or subjective, and remember that there are many kinds of humor: slapstick, silly, satirical, and black humor, which makes fun of what would traditionally be a very serious subject matter to certain people. Quite often you find that kind of humor in medical situations where something very serious is going on, but the people who are helping others are engaging in black humor. Anyway, let's take a look at our example. I work 60 hours a week to provide for my husband and our pets, 3 cats and a dog. My husband is retired, so I work, but he does the shopping and cooking and cleans up after all the creatures in the house. There's always something breaking, like one of the cars or cat's toys, or someone needs to go to the vet or dentist. We never seem to keep enough dog food or cat litter in the house, and the race to keep the house a flea-free zone seems to be a lost cause, both monetarily and from a tactical standpoint. I'm beginning to think that the fleas are outsmarting us. My husband and I are constantly working so hard to provide for and care for our furry friends that we never even have time for each other or to take a vacation together. I'm beginning to think that the world has it all wrong. Our pets are not the dumb animals. We are. Interesting. Well, in this case, the author is being entertaining. The humor comes from the fact that the wife and husband work so hard that they are beginning to think they are the dumb animals, not the pets. Let's do a little bit of practicing. You should look before you leap. Now, what is the author trying to do? What's the purpose in this case? To entertain, persuade, or narrate? Well, the author is actually trying to persuade. And the clue word would be should. Let's take a look at another example. The day was sunny without a cloud in the sky. The wind was blowing from the north and it was cool. As the sun went down, the colors in the sky were astounding, and soon the twinkling stars were out. Okay, what are we looking at? Are we persuading someone of something? Are we narrating? Are we describing? Well, if you look at these words, sunny, wind blowing from the north, it was cool, sun went down, colors are astounding, and we have twinkling stars. It looks like we are describing. So you have to look at all the words in order to help determine the purpose that you're looking at. Let's take another example here and see what the author is trying to do. What purpose is the author using? JoJo's restaurant is terrible. You shouldn't eat there because the food is disgusting and the service is awful. Okay, is the author trying to entertain us by telling us about JoJo's restaurant? Is the author describing? Or is the author trying to persuade us? Well, even though we're getting a description of what's going on, I would say that the major purpose would be to persuade. And let's take a look at the words. Terrible. When you see words like this, remember we talked about persuasion when we're using superlatives like this. Here's another emotional, subjective word, disgusting, awful. The author is trying to persuade us not to eat there. You cannot measure any of these types of adjectives, so therefore they are subjective, and the purpose would definitely be to persuade. Let's look at a few more examples. Avatar is a science fiction movie produced by James Cameron in 2009 and starring Sam Worthington that uses cutting-edge motion capture filming techniques. It is the best movie ever made. Okay, here are the choices. To narrate, which remember means to tell a story. To persuade. To entertain. Inform and persuade. Okay, let's take a look at this and see what we have. Well, we know that it is a science fiction movie that was actually produced by James Cameron in 2009 with Sam Worthington, and it did use cutting-edge motion capture filming techniques at the time. So this part would definitely be giving us some information. So it would be I for inform here. Not telling us a story and not entertaining us. However, go take a look at it is the best movie ever made. Well, this might be the best movie to some person, but it might not be to many other people. Therefore, we have a dual purpose in this case. We are actually looking at inform, it's giving us information, and it's persuading. So be careful. Sometimes you could be looking at something written by an author that might have more than one purpose. Let's try another example. A woman says to her husband, "Guess what? I won the $100 million lottery. Go pack." He returns with a suitcase and says, "Are we taking our dream vacation?" She says, "I am, but you're not. Get out. I just called a divorce lawyer." What is the author trying to do in here? To persuade people to go on a vacation? To entertain someone or amuse someone? I guess we are really entertaining here because we have two sets of entertain. Anyway, let us check and see what we're doing here. Well, we are actually trying to entertain because the husband assumes, the humor comes in the fact that the husband assumes that because his wife has won the lottery, everything is going to be fine in their relationship and they're going to go off merrily into the sunset and enjoy their millions. However, he has totally mistaken his wife's intention and he's about to get divorced. It may be cruel, but some people like this kind of humor. Let's look at another example. In the 1950s, old rock and roll was born. By the 60s, the Beatles had started the British invasion. In the 1970s, Stevie Wonder, Fleetwood Mac, the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, John Travolta, and Earth, Wind and Fire rocked the times and ushered in the disco days with artists like Gloria Gaynor. By the 1980s, Cyndi Lauper, Joan Jett, Huey Lewis and the News, Bette Midler, and Michael Jackson were stirring it up. In the 90s, Dr. Dre, Madonna, Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, Britney Spears, the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Will Smith, and others were getting jiggy with it. In the 2000s, Beyoncé, Lady Gaga, Eminem, Coldplay, Christina Aguilera, and Gwen Stefani topped the charts. Now Selena Gomez, Justin Bieber, Rihanna, Chris Brown, Katy Perry, Miley Cyrus, Jay-Z, the Black Eyed Peas, and Taylor Swift are setting music trends. What are we doing here? What is the author's purpose? To entertain, narrate, describe, or persuade? Well, basically, since this is being done over time, this is a narrative passage. Let's just take a look at the time frame. It starts back in the 1950s all the way up through today's time. So basically, it is a narrative.